Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
It took months longer than expected, but tonight the Amtrak Pacific Surfliner is back on track. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Passenger rail service between San Diego and Orange County resumed today following repair work to stabilize the tracks. KPBS North County reporter Tanya Thorne has the update.
Trains are back up and running between San Diego and Orange counties. Rail service came to a halt after shifts in the San Clemente tracks were detected. Emergency repair work started in October, and travelers were connected by bus bridges.
It was a lot of jumping back and forth from going on, especially the first week it shut down.
Vit Vu wasn't fond of the bus bridge. He's a student at CSU San Marcos and visits family in Orange County. He doesn't have a car, so relied on the train until the recent interruption.
I was waiting here from pretty much like 7 to 12. Like 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. So it was really hard, and it got really confusing.
Transit officials had hoped to have service restored in February, but winter storms delayed the work.
We're really excited to reach this point after many months of construction, and we very much appreciate the public's patience in all of this.
Eric Carpenter is with the Orange County Transportation Authority. He said the project wasn't an easy one for transit officials.
So this is a very unusual project. Of course, it was an emergency project, and usually our projects are anything but that. They take years of planning and years of construction.
The emergency repairs were estimated to cost $13 million. And Carpenter said the OCTA board is looking into funding for studies that will look into long-term fixes for this part of the rail line.
This was an emergency fix, and we know that it is for the short term, and that we've already started looking at the longer term fixes.
While rail service is restored, some construction work will continue in San Clemente for several more weeks. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
A hepatitis A outbreak tied to strawberries has sickened at least 7 people. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman says some of the potentially contaminated berries were sold in San Diego stores.
A voluntary recall of organic strawberries includes fruit from 2 San Diego County Costco business centers, Trader Joe's and Aldi stores. CDC investigators say at least 7 hepatitis A cases in California and Washington state are likely linked to frozen strawberries from farms in Baja California. Los Angeles County health officials say they've now identified a case linked to the outbreak. Last month, the federal investigation prompted Otay Mesa fruit distributor California Splendor to recall frozen organic strawberries from Costco's, including 2 business centers in Kearny Mesa and San Marcos. A food distributor in Oregon also recalled strawberries, which were sent to Trader Joe's and Aldi stores in California. The FDA says people should not eat the potentially contaminated berries and either return them or toss them out.
If you've been exposed to it, so you've taken some of the strawberries, make sure you let your doctors know.
Dr. William Sang from Kaiser Permanente San Diego says Hep A commonly spreads through fecal matter. He says if someone is exposed and becomes infected, they might start seeing symptoms a few weeks later.
Sudden abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and then about 4 days after that, you start to notice your urine gets very, very, very dark. Plus your stool gets very, very pale, all the coloring. So those are, if you see those, you have got to go to the doctor to get it tested out.
Sang says less than 10% of those with Hep A will have symptoms. Most cases resolve on their own, and younger children generally have fewer symptoms from the virus. Vaccines and post-infection treatments are available. The FDA's website has specific images of the recalled frozen strawberry bags and details including specific expiration date and lot numbers. San Diego County health officials officials have been tracking a small uptick in Hep A cases since January, but they say none are connected to the outbreak involving frozen strawberries. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
A budget proposal from San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria is now getting an in-depth analysis by the city's independent budget analyst before it goes to the city council. KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado spoke with experts to ask if the money is being spent where it should be.
When Mayor Todd Gloria released his $5.12 billion budget for fiscal year 2024, the so-called Getting It Done plan, he said it reflects the city's top priorities: solving homelessness, upgrading critical infrastructure, improving services, and keeping the city safe. He also said it was balanced and conservative.
It recognizes the potential for an economic slowdown in the next couple of years, and so it is conservative in its spending.
But is the money going to the right things?
Part of the work over the next 2 weeks as I and my office analyze the budget will be determining whether or not it does strike the right tone.
That's Charles Modica, the city's independent budget analyst. His job is to make sure the budget allocates enough money towards the right things, like homelessness. Some have already said it's not enough.
We'll be going through the budget and talking with folks who actually provide those services in the city and out of the city to make sure that the amounts that are added are reasonable and are sufficient to kind of tackle those programs.
Modica says at first glance it does look balanced, but over the next 2 weeks they'll be going over it with a fine-tooth comb and ready an in-depth report. But he already sees an area of concern.
And right now, while the budget as a whole is balanced, it does not appear to be structurally balanced. So next year will need to be either growing city revenues or potentially cutting ongoing costs.
That's because some of the money it relies on to pay for some of the services are one-time sources of income, like the $56 million in federal funds from the American Rescue Plan.
This is the last of the amount that we had allocated that is planned to be used in the proposed budget. In addition to that, we're relying on a little over $60 million in budgetary savings from the current year that we're in right now.
He also says about half of the spending will go to public safety, and that's typical. University of San Diego economics professor Alan Jin says there seems to be the right emphasis on housing and homeless services, but there are some trade-offs when a budget is proposed. And while ideally more money should go to homelessness, there's a lot of money allocated towards overtime because there's a shortage of officers and firefighters.
Yes, money does go to the police, but even so, we're below the typical standard then in terms of police officers per residence. We have about 1.43 police officers per 1,000 residents. The typical standard, or the goal that typically is looked for, is about 2.
But he does warn the city should be cautious in case of a recession that could be looming. But overall,
I think it's balanced in terms of addressing some of the needs that we're facing, and I think it's realistic given the uncertain economic outlook that we're facing.
Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
The city of La Mesa is beginning a year-long process to update the improvement plan for parks and recreation. KPBS reporter Katie Heisen looked into the undertaking.
The parks plan hasn't been updated in more than a decade, and the city has been growing, becoming younger and more diverse. Community Services Director Sue Richardson says they made sure to seek input reflecting the city's diverse demographics to determine what residents want.
Trails and open space and areas to have passive family gatherings was really the highest on the list.
Richardson says in addition to recommending improvements, they're identifying where services don't exist at all. The city currently has 14 parks, but she says there's still many neighborhoods that don't have a park within a 15-minute walk, mostly in West La Mesa.
La Mesa,
Mejgan Afshan grew up going to La Mesa's parks and now works on local equity issues. She's hopeful the plan will improve quality of life for all the city's residents.
We're growing very rapidly, and so the concern, I think, is making sure that everybody is accessing these resources.
She points to the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights developed by the state.
All children should be able to have slept underneath the stars once. All children should have been able to have the experience of learning how to swim or being in the water in a boat once.
She says outdoor programming is especially important since the pandemic, as suicide and mental health issues increased, and needs to be ensured for everyone, including low-income and differently abled families.
We have these capabilities in places here in La Mesa, but we need to be able to gauge who is accessing and who isn't.
Residents can voice their opinions at public workshops this Thursday and next Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. Katie Hyson, KPBS News.
As Congress returns from spring break, lawmakers are staring down a long list of critical issues to tackle. And at the top, raising the nation's debt ceiling. Mike Valerio explains how the budget battle could have real-world implications for your finances.
A financial crisis may be looming.
If it did happen, it would have very, very negative impact.
As lawmakers in Washington have yet to come to an agreement on raising the nation's debt ceiling.
I understand the politics, but there is a time when the higher interest of a nation has to prevail.
Democrats are seeking a clean bill to increase the country's borrowing capacity. But House Republicans want to leverage their slim majority to win concessions on spending from the White House.
A no strings attached debt limit increase will not pass.
That kind of discussion, the cuts, belongs in a discussion about the budget, not as a precondition for avoiding default.
A default on U.S. debt payments would cut off the U.S. Treasury from borrowing, potentially affecting Social Security payments, veterans benefits, and federal employees' salaries, among others. To guard your finances in case of a potential default, Bankrate's Greg McBride advises paying down your debt and building up emergency savings.
Unfortunately, we're hostage to this because there aren't a whole lot of action steps that we as consumers can take to fully insulate ourselves.
And says the political brinksmanship alone is damaging.
Even if it gets solved at the 11th hour, markets get nervous. And when that happens, there's less incentive or less appetite for risk.
I'm Mike Valerio reporting.
California ranks #1 for catalytic converter thefts. And as Christine Lazar reports, the vehicle most targeted is the Toyota Prius.
Rodrigo Fortes has had the catalytic converter in his Toyota Prius stolen not just once, but twice.
Honestly, it was quite upsetting.
The second theft happened even after Fortes had his mechanic put a metal plate underneath his car to keep thieves from accessing the converter. Thieves just cut around it.
I feel like at this point, I'm just waiting for the next time it will happen again.
This is video of a catalytic converter being stolen from a Prius in the West Valley last month. 2 cars pull up, and the thieves remove the converter in less than 2.5 minutes. Sacco Arpesian with Reseda Mufflers is struggling to keep up with the demand for replacement parts.
The dealer will say 6 months. I've ordered catalytic converters. It's been more than 6 months.
The Prius is the most popular car with thieves because their catalytic converters contain more unused precious metals than standard gas vehicles.
The guy comes in from Toyota all the time to drop off parts, and he tells me, he's like, it's a zoo. You know, he's like, we have over 50 Priuses just sitting in the lot. They've been sitting for a very long time.
Reseda Mufflers is seeing more cars with stolen converters right now than ever before.
So I get at least 1 call a day. I mean, at least, you know, and that's just us. We're a small shop.
And gas prices are back on the rise again in San Diego and nationwide. According to the Oil Price Information Service, the average price in our county is up slightly at $4.93 a gallon. Nationally, the average price rose by about 7 cents to about $3.67. AAA blames the increased cost of higher oil prices, which topped $80. And this comes after OPEC Plus announced production cuts beginning in May. We're hearing a lot about super blooms in Southern California. The scenes are in the result of all of the rain that we've had this winter, but not everyone is getting the flower show that they expected. Lori Perez shows us one place that's drawing a crowd.
The poppy super bloom this year is, in a word,
orange.
Okay, a second word.
It's spectacular.
Off the beaten path is the beaten path this season in Lancaster because the poppies have exploded in lots of places.
I love flowers, so I like it.
Creating a carpet of color.
My name is Trenton, and I love coming out here.
On fields all over the city, except on the actual State Park Poppy Reserve.
A little bit of disappointment as far as what Mother Nature has given us.
After all the rain we had, Ranger Matt Williams says expectations for a super bloom remain high. But after some late snow and cold here on the reserve, nothing is poppying up, at least not yet.
Again, it's Mother Nature, though. She kind of does what it wants. That's why we call it a reserve, because it's a reserve for her if she decides to show up.
Meanwhile, in the flatlands along virtually every road leading to the reserve, crowds are finding the flowers to fill their senses and their social media feeds.
We love it. We're just looking for the right combination of colors.
I had a new baby, so he needs to get in the pictures.
Experts say the last super bloom was 2019, the result of a regular series of soaking rains, which we definitely also had this year. And when those showers bring these kind of flowers...
This is like once in a decade bloom that happens, and we're driving in here from San Francisco to see this place. Look. This is just wild. I mean, it's just beautiful.
Borrego Springs is another popular spot each year to catch the wildflowers in bloom. Our video journalist Charlotte Radulovich captured these images over the weekend. A park ranger told her that temperatures are rapidly rising, meaning the flowers will not be in bloom much longer. The ranger also said that they are seeing more instances of heat stroke and warned hikers against wandering off the trail. Nature has resurrected the previously dried out Tulare Lake in California. This winter's historic atmospheric rivers and several feet of snow have brought with them some snow melt, turning the dry lake bed back into an inland ocean. And as Bill Weir reports, it's very bad news for the farmers who've been working the land for generations.
In California's Central Valley, farmers have spent much of the last 20 years praying for rain. But then came this winter of relentless rivers in the sky, enough to bring a long-dead lake back to life and drown over 150 square miles of farmland and counting. So now they pray for the water to stop.
It is mind-blowing to realize that if you'd stood here for the last couple of generations, you'd be watching the sunset over dusty fields of cotton or alfalfa or pistachio trees, and now it is waterfront property. I had no idea Tulare Lake was once the biggest freshwater body west of the Mississippi, but it was dammed and diked and drained to build a $2 billion agriculture industry, and now it's back. It's proof that water never forgets, and this may just be the beginning, because behind those clouds over there, the Sierra Nevadas are so packed with snow. It's 260% above normal, and sooner or later that's going to melt, which is only going to make this flooding worse and last longer. The last time it flooded this dramatically here was 1983, and it took 2 years to dry out. You were telling me about the effects in '83.
Yes.
The town hollowed out pretty much.
Yes, I was on the school board at that time in 1983, and we lost half our school population, about 1/3 of our city population, and a lot of the people that were field workers lost their homes, their cars.
And this time, in addition to the dripping time bomb in the mountains, Corcoran is many feet lower in elevation after years of over-pumping groundwater to grow thirstier crops, made this one of the fastest sinking areas in the nation.
So the ground has literally sunk in some places by 10 or 15 feet over the past decade. That has literally changed the topography of the historical lake bed. Some places are lower even than they were the last time there was a big flood event. So there's quite a few unknowns.
That is UCLA scientist Daniel Swain, and last summer he published a paper that found weather whiplash will become only more extreme on an overheating planet. And worst case, Tulare Lake could grow into a vast inland sea.
That as disruptive and as damaging as this year's flooding has been, it's still nowhere near close to what we foresee as the plausible worst case scenario.
The levee that we're standing on is called the Corcoran Levee. It's a 14.5-mile levee that protects the city of Corcoran, the 2 state prisons, the residents here. There's about 22,000 residents and about 8,000 inmates. And so the work behind us that you'll see over here with the tractor work in the distance, they're actually building the levee up another 4 to 5 feet. God willing, that'll protect the city of Corcoran.
There's a race against the melt, basically.
That's exactly
right?
So we've been fortunate with a very slow, mild spring so far, but we know the heat's coming.
All of the crops are completely flooded and ruined. So it takes a lot of jobs for people. That's a lot of food that we provide for up and down California and all around the nation. It's pretty scary.
And unfortunately, this is just the beginning, right?
Because very beginning.
The big melt hasn't even really begun.
Yes. This is just from the rain. The snow melts. There's nowhere for it to go besides here. You know?
So Tulare Lake is back for a while.
Yeah, it's back, and it may take over and put us out.
Cool conditions will persist as we go right into Tuesday, but a big change coming up in terms of warmer air as we go beyond down the road. Also looking at some gusty winds throughout the mountains over the course of the next 24 to 36 hours. So that's where we'll start, and through early Wednesday, pre-dawn hours, there are wind advisories out, including the mountainous terrain and even some of the deserts here as we work our way out toward Julian, Pine Valley, and points out off toward the east. Some of those gusty wind speeds, again, can result in some difficult traveling conditions and perhaps some travel delays. So keep that in mind. It can still be a little breezy throughout some of the interior valleys, but not quite to the magnitude that we see the wind advisories off to the east. Some clouds as we work our way throughout the overnight. We'll be dropping down into the mid-50s, the same toward Oceanside, Chula Vista. Borrego Springs 54, Ramona 49, Mount Laguna dropping down to 41. There's your howling winds around Mount Laguna. As we work our way into tomorrow, Borrego Springs up to 80. Still a little cool, again, compared to the historical average. 63 is common from Oceanside to San Diego and around Chula Vista. Futurecast shows us some of those clouds, again, throughout the late night into the early morning time frame. And then gradually, as we work our way toward the afternoon, we will start to see some of those clouds, again, beginning to burn off. Here's what we look for in terms of precipitation. So far for the month, only around 1/10 of an inch. Historical average rainfall is right around 6/10. So again, we have a little ways to go. Of course, that was on the heels of a very soggy March. Coast extended forecast. I talked about a warming trend. Here it is. And we're going to be looking nice Thursday into the weekend. Highs into the 70s. Interior valleys, we're going to be stretching out into the 80s by Friday, but still a little cool Tuesday and into Wednesday. Meanwhile, wind is the big factor here into the mountains, both Tuesday into early Wednesday, and then here too, gradually, we're going to see those temperatures climbing at least a little bit into the deserts. So we're going to be up into the upper 80s come Friday and into Saturday. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Pavic.
The San Diego Padres are honoring Johnny Ritchie, the man who broke the color barrier for their club 75 years ago. And in his honor, the Friars will wear their Pacific Coast League uniforms for tonight's game against the Atlanta Braves. They'll also honor this year's winners of the Johnny Ritchie Scholarship during an on-field pregame ceremony at Petco Park. The scholarship awards $10,000 to 10 high school seniors who have overcome academic adversity. Now, if you follow KPBS and KPBS News on Twitter, you probably saw the message about us moving away from the platform today. KPBS reporter Alexander Wynn talks to a social media researcher about the uncertainties surrounding Twitter.
When news break, the first instinct for a lot of people is to jump on Twitter for the latest updates. San Diego State Media Studies professor Rebecca Nee says the platform played an important role for news on the global stage.
Remember the Arab Spring, activists being able to use Twitter to really describe to the rest of the world their plight. There are 2 little girls in Syria who are documenting the civil war there. It's a platform unlike anything we have ever seen.
She says social media allows users to converse on the issue of the day and participate in the process of journalism. So today, when KPBS announced it is moving away from the platform, Nee says it was sad to hear.
I am sad to see these organizations leaving Twitter because they're There really is no other platform out there that does what Twitter is able to do.
KPBS's decision to move away from Twitter follows NPR's decision to do the same. Twitter recently labeled the network as state-affiliated media, and after pushback, changed it to government-funded media. It's the same label the platform used for other public media networks, such as PBS and the BBC.
Which as a label implies that it doesn't have editorial independence from the government. That is not accurate.
Heather Milne is KPBS's communication and marketing director. She says because of that, it became clear that Twitter isn't a credible platform for the station.
It's really important for us to make sure that KPBS content is accessible for all. So we have a number of places that people can continue to find our content.
Besides radio and TV, audiences can find KPBS's content on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. KPBS News Director Terrence Shepard says the station is always looking for ways to keep the audience as informed as possible.
We will use our existing platforms, and we're always exploring new places to connect with people where they are.
Twitter CEO Elon Musk did not respond to a tweet seeking comment, and an email to Twitter's press account auto-replied with a poop emoji. In the newsroom, Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Although we have more time here in San Diego County, tomorrow is the national deadline to file your taxes. On NPR's Morning Edition, how the IRS is improving customer service while making sure people actually pay what they owe. And on KPBS Midday Edition, a conversation with one of San Diego's most celebrated novelists. Don Winslow talks about the latest entry in his crime fiction trilogy, City of Dreams. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.